Morning, everyone. Welcome to what is likely our last session of the Capital Improvements Program Committee. Today's the day that we'll make our recommendation to the Finance Committee for what items they should incorporate into the 2024 budget process. You'll find on your desks that we've got the list reshuffled based on the items that we selected last time to move forward. That list ends at the 400 block site upgrades. Where the line is drawn there, and then everything below the line, in theory, will wait until additional funds are identified. There was an update, I think, late yesterday, that one of the projects that was sitting perhaps has an alternative fund source, and I believe that is the River Edge Trail Extension, where the Room Tax Commission had approved $100,000 to assist that project. But that still left us $400,000 short. And so our Assistant City Planner, Andy Lynch, who's coming up to the podium, has been in touch with a few of the foundations, and I will let him talk us through that. So welcome.
I think you just got it for me. Thank you. Yes, so the River's Edge Trail Extension, this is the section south of Thomas around the Colby and DPW properties. We had secured room tax funding of up to $100,000, so that essentially took the budget down to $400,000. I've spoken with a couple of local foundations and received some very positive feedback. So I would ask that that's included in the CIP budget to give it a place. I think Mary Ann can fill in the details on how that's done, but I'm feeling very confident that we're going to be able to get that number down very small, and hopefully get this built next year.
Okay, so if we could secure all or most of it through foundation funding, that really wouldn't mean any additional debt for the city, and yet, or any additional levy pressure, but we would then be able to get that segment done. Committee members, how do you feel about moving that trail extension then above the line with the understanding, I mean, obviously, we would communicate to the Finance Committee that if those grants are not received or those funds are not received, the project wouldn't move forward. But if they're able to secure that funding through the philanthropic community, we could get that extra project done. Go ahead, Mr. Gale.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If we do that, I think we owe the council some guidance. And I think the guidance should be, we set a number, 100,000, 50,000, whatever the number is, that the city is willing to invest. And if the rest of the money doesn't come in through our foundations, who have always been extremely generous to this community, don't meet it, then it has to move forward to the following year.
Yep. I think that's where it would land in finance. I mean, the way we're sitting right now with funding, you know, obviously where the line is drawn is where we run out of funding with our conventional borrowing unless we take on more. My guess is that committee would hold firm to or very, very close to the fact that if all of that difference isn't secured, that project may not be able to move forward unless they can identify project savings in other areas that might fund it. You know, if they have projects that come in under budget in the first place and may have some surplus, that obviously could assist as well. Mr. Gisselman?
Yes, thank you. So if we don't, Andrew, if we only get to like 340,000, or, I mean, can partial budget do some things, especially with the Colby and sort of work through the trail so that it becomes at least walkable and presentable and a nice trail?
Right. I think there is some flex in the budget. So if we're close, I think we could probably, still make it work, and that kind of just depends on the actual trail layout. I think there's some efficiency there to be gained, and that might depend on inches of gravel even that go down.
Sure.
So
we'd be able to scale the project to meet the budget?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. So then, are we kind of in agreement then that we want to move that project up underneath the 400 block site upgrades, knowing that we may have alternative funding? Go ahead, Gary.
Does that take a motion or
No, because
just
we'll
sort of
vote on
like
the whole list when we
shaking
get
it?
the list done. I
Okay.
mean, we kind of do it by consensus until we have a list that we think we can send out.
Great, okay, thank you.
So it looks like everyone's kind of nodding, so I think we're in agreement on that, so we'll move that trail extension up. And then Tuesday night, the Finance Committee is going to take another look at the projects that had been applied for ARPA dollars over the course of the last year and a half. The ones that they had kind of put a pin in to see what happens and then reevaluate them later. They're going to be doing that reevaluation on Tuesday night, so it's possible that some of these things that had previously applied for ARPA may secure some of that funding, depending on where we're at with other requests, so.
Yeah. And there were two items, the fire station replacement and then the council chamber video and room control upgrades for 140. That actually was an ARPA request too.
Yeah, so those two projects may find funding, even though they're below the line on our list here. Anything else that anyone sees that landed below that's condition critical? Go ahead, Gary.
I'll weigh in. I think there's a lot of issues, a lot of projects, but I come down to council chamber video and room upgrade. I guess we had internet issues the other day. I think we have to really seriously think about how we present the city council and the committees and all that, how we're presenting that to the public. I think we can do a better job. I think the county in their assembly room has monitors that the public can see, and I think we can do a better job. And I speak to that council upgrade. I think it just shows how we're presenting, again, like I said, how we present the city council and the government of the city of Wausau to the public through the internet, through the variety of ways, and I think we should talk about that. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep, and that's something too that we could note with our recommendation, is that we support that project, yet we ran out of funding. And then depending on how the ARPA discussion goes Tuesday night, if the Finance Committee funds it, or, maybe if there's a split between CIP and ARPA to bring the cost down, I think that's certainly something that they may want to bargain on too. So anything else that we know of? The only thing that I saw that was marked critical on the list that didn't make it was the north end roof at 400 Myron Street. And with those things, you never know if you can get that extra year or not. I mean, we've squeaked that extra year out of roofs before. I mean, we had one that didn't go so well, it was a critical failure. So, but, if we could squeak one more year out of there, I know we're going to have substantial work in the coming years going on that new fleet facility, which will then likely bring some shifting of space and renovations to those Myron Street buildings. Mr. Gale?
Typically, at the end of a fiscal year, Mary Ann is able to reach inside her budget and find money that we haven't spent that was authorized for a specific project. Sometimes there's more than not enough, and it's more likely not enough for things, but I think the committee should be asked to move this up, the Finance Committee, and to ask Mary Ann to kind of keep an eye on things.
To consider it for project savings
Yeah.
or surplus?
There's always those road construction projects that went high. There's always those that go a little low. It doesn't happen as much as it used to, I'm sure.
Yeah, the low is a dream for us now.
But I think, because if you don't, you're going to wind up having to step into the contingency fund,
Right.
take the money out if you have a critical failure.
Right.
And that does not include if we're unfortunate enough to have somebody there and get hurt because of the failure.
Yeah, I think it's more of a leak situation, but, that they've been working on patch here and a patch there, but I think that that's something we certainly can put a pin in, with our recommendation, that if there's project savings from this season's projects, or a surplus. I mean, obviously, we finished 2022 with not a lot of surplus of any kind after we adjusted our investments to the market. But that doesn't mean 23 won't end that way, and if we have at least the first half of the winter is kind to us, we may do okay for 23. Michael?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Ed on that one. I find it a little concerning that we're leapfrogging the River's Edge Trail over the roof replacement, since they scored quite similarly. So if we can find funding from some other source, I would be amenable to that. The one thing that I do question though is, the only other project we have on below the line that has outside support is the tennis court replacement. The private donation, do we know if that's dependent on the courts being done this next year, or would that wait a year, or?
Oh, I don't know if we
I
have,
don't know.
I don't see that we have Jamie on WebEx. That's a question we certainly, oh, come on up.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
Andy with the Parks Department.
Yep.
Yeah, Jamie's got another meeting right now.
Oh, okay.
So, to my knowledge, that's not contingent upon completing this year.
Okay.
So, however, those courts, I think there's images in the book, but they're
They are a little rough.
they're at pretty much end of life, and we're, like Oak Island, for instance. We've been doing a lot of patching and caulking and that sort of thing, and we're looking to do some small project funds to resurface that. But with Alexander, it's beyond that. We're looking at all new asphalt with that in order to turn those courts back into a usable, safe surface. So.
Okay.
Well, and that project was actually to be dual striped for pickleball too, right? Wasn't that part of the
I think
request?
No, this was pickleball only.
Oh, this was convert to
This
pickleball
was
only.
convert-
Okay, I know
yeah, the-
pickleball
the
was in
funding
there.
is dependent on the convert to pickleball only.
Right, okay. Marianne, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just going to say, this year we're in kind of a new situation because of the additional shared revenue. And as, through the budget process, we're going to be, discussing as a finance committee how we want to manage those additional funds. So my recommendation would be to go through this below the line list and maybe make a recommendation on priorities if, for example, because the donation is there, or if you feel that there's something that needs to be modified, that we go through and establish a priority recommendation to the finance committee if they choose to use some of that shared revenue for capital.
Capital. Well, and so just through our discussion today, we've bumped up the River Edge Trail because we have alternate funding, but also what looks like we're going to probably bump up at right now an unfunded recommendation is the north end roof at Myron Street and the council chamber video upgrade. Anything else that we wanted to push in that same direction in case shared revenue allows for the projects? Mr. Gale?
I am somewhat concerned about the fact that playground equipment is again marked way below the line. Some of my neighbors in the neighborhood I live in are, because of COVID, have began to try to go back to the old system where only a single parent works, and the other parent stays home and works with the children and takes care of stuff. And if that trend continues, and I think it is from some of the things I've heard and seen, that means our parks take on a whole new meaning to our community. Because we don't charge anybody to go into our parks. There's no fee to use the equipment, other than the taxes you pay that takes care of everything. In the past, we've had a chance many years ago to go to Marshfield, to go to Aspirus, and ask them for a few dollars to help us with some of those playgrounds. And they did it, but we would not allow them to put up any signage or anything that they got credit for other than the council's thank you. I'm wondering if the Parks Department has explored that, and if they have, I apologize for not asking this before this meeting, but at the same time, it might be to our benefit to explore that with them and see if that opportunity exists to get some help. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the suggestion. I have to apologize. Jamie is really the one that has handled all the playground work. And to my knowledge, we're really sitting with two that are kind of at that point with the city of Wausau playgrounds. We've done a really good job. I mean, this council has helped us as far as funding, turning a lot of these into updated facilities, and some community block grants and that sort of thing has helped as well. So Yes, I will relay that to Jamie as far as exploring some other funding sources for playgrounds.
I'm looking.
Thank you.
Which two parks was it, Andy? It was River Highland and what was the other
And
one?
Westview Terrace.
Westview Terrace. So, so we've gone through, we had also, I mean, when we were in a situation, I think when we started out with recession in the mid 2000s, one of the first things we started to cut from was street and road projects and then playgrounds. And we got to a point where we were way, way behind. And so then we had to ramp up our funding. So we did that. And I think, and like you said, we've made it pretty much all over town between that and, some other, even COVID funding for one of them, I think, and pool savings we used for one, the year we didn't open the pools. So I think we've gotten a long way on it. These two look like they were maybe put up in the 90s or early 2000s. The equipment looks fairly,
I think they've eclipsed that 20-year threshold.
Okay.
I should say, rough timeline.
Yeah.
Usually that 20-year mark is about when
Yeah.
you're starting to have failures and compliance issues.
well, and the stuff we took out was way, way worse. I mean.
Agreed.
And not compliant with certain standards. So I don't think we're as far behind the eight ball as we've been, but we don't want to get to that point either. So,
Madam Chairman?
yes, go ahead.
When did you come on the city council?
2008. That's when we started to put them all off.
And prior to that, in 2005, your father served, and
He did.
he helped us name Westview Terrace. And we did that through a poll that was taken in that community by the Parks Department for names. So that park was built in 2004 or 5, and it was built on a very contentious battle.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I mean, the equipment doesn't look like it's in bad shape. I'm not sure that is, yes, it's a neighborhood park, but I don't know that it's in that particular neighborhood. I don't know that it has a ton of utilization. It's got some, the neighbors all use it, obviously. But I think that the work we did at Schofield Park last year was actually more impactful because that one has more use.
Yep, and I think, you're looking at kind of two different dynamics too. So Schofield Park, there's some different and more amenities, whereas Westview Terrace is, fairly limited to just the
Right.
playground and a small path.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, we certainly, I feel like we could at least squeak one more year out of this if we have to. I mean, the need is certainly understood. But, and that actually scored down a little further than some of the other things. Where we're sitting now with our move up is the Myron Street roof, the council room video and technology, and that River Edge Trail. Was there any other project that we wanted to push through in the event that shared revenue becomes a source? Or if another source reveals itself? Michael?
The asset management software scored very high, and I think one of the concerns with that is that the county is implementing that system. If we waited on that, would there be a greater cost to us to implement that in a future year?
We can
Or
find
can
that out,
we-
or it may slow them down too if
Yeah.
the partner funding isn't there.
Right, and I think, the other thing is we've got these brand-new facilities that are much more complex than the previous facility, and one of the big push is for the utility to be able to manage the maintenance on all of the equipment, all of the automation, and, we, I think, like to see that funded too.
Oh, the Public Works Director's coming up. Come on up, Eric.
Good.
Yeah, I think with the asset management software, initially, the utility was going to roll that out, to start with the city side. And then we started working with IT. They said they were going to take that for county and the city. Earlier this year, they had said that they aren't going to get to it this year, so I've been starting to write an RFP for asset management software. The utility did budget this year, $200,000 to get that off the ground. And so this fall, we're proposing to go out for RFP and at least begin that process and select a software to move forward with. But it will just be for our vertical assets at water and wastewater, and we'll start populating that. And then hopefully in subsequent years, we will look at doing that on all of our horizontal assets throughout the city with streets, our distribution collection system, and signs, everything else.
So we would be able to move forward without county and then find something that is expandable for our own needs as we go
Yes.
forward?
Yeah.
Yes.
I
That-
think that's a very popular strategy that communities use too. Like we were looking at the city of Naples down in Illinois. They've been, trying to maximize the utilization of that software through a phased approach. And I think it's worked really well for them. So I think, Eric is headed in the right direction, thinking that.
Well, and phased implementation on stuff like that, when it's all new, makes sense too, just because it's a lot if you try to do everything at once. I mean, we learned that with Workday. It's takes over everything when you're trying to, fit everything into a narrow time frame. So we certainly could move that software up if the utility has funded it. Michael?
Yeah, so I guess the big question is that, so does the funding need to be in place to write the RFP then, or?
The utility has funding just
Okay.
for water and sewer. So, I mean, I feel like that the city will end up selecting a type of software this year and then move forward with that. It will work with all the divisions in the department and all the other departments in the city to make sure that, who needs it, what parts of it they need. Because this software will work everything from our assets on the street to all of our fleet, so it's a extensive software. It also does all of our job costing, or it'll connect with Workday. So I think there's going to be a lot of implementation that has to go. So as Mary Ann said, I think we're trying to take it a piece at a time if we can. And
So, okay.
So the 170 that the utility has would be enough to get off the ground?
yeah, from what we know right now,
Yeah.
the 200,000 that we have will be enough to purchase a software and then also get our assets, at least our vertical assets
So,
inputted.
okay, so we could be moving forward with this and then in the budget in subsequent years expanding
Yes.
the rest
Yep.
of the city. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can move that up too then,
Yep.
as a funded recommendation with the utility funding. Anything else? Or do we have a quality list here? Gary?
Well, I'll just raise the issue. With regard to Fire Station Number 1, I'm for the replacement, and I see the need, but is it just for the acquisition? I have questions with regard to the spot. I think Mr. Gale at
Yep.
prior meeting,
The fire chief is coming up. We actually, one fire chief ago, had a little bit of a feasibility study on that site. Finance is actually going to take this up again Tuesday, because it requested ARPA funding too for the same amount. And that's one of the things that we put the pin in.
well, my question would be, because I have some questions with regard to, is that exactly the right spot for the new fire station? And I see the chief, so that's fine, but the result then, it comes to finance, ARPA, is it just for the potential acquisition of some land and property? Or are we
This land.
gearing, are we on the path now for that spot on the corner of Thomas and Grand Avenue?
So I think Bob wants to tell you, it was an extensive study that was done by Five Bugles to look at the space needs, response needs, and what parcels were out there. And this was the top selection by Five Bugles, which specializes in fire. So
That was a
Go ahead,
entirely, exactly accurate description. So yes, I'm preparing to bring this back to the Finance Committee next week, Tuesday, as they review this. When I brought it forward last time, did not bring forward all of the past research that had been done on this, and I've been digging into that. That preceded me. I came in 2019. This occurred in 2017. 5 sites were looked at throughout the city as far as what to do with Fire Station Number 2 and our downtown Central Station, normally known as Central. So Central and Station 2 were both designated that they both needed replacement or extensive remodeling that was cost prohibitive at that time. There was several different options that were presented to the council, and at that time in 2018, when they finally went for approval, they went with the site that the city already owned on the 52 Parkway and putting a small outlying station just to replace Fire Station 2 and move the replacement of Fire Station 1 or Central down the road for a future year. And the Floral Shop property was highly studied. We can fit a facility on there. We will not face grant. I think that that's one of the things, and I listened to Ed's comments the last time around, we did not probably put out a good description of how that is going to lay on that site. There's so many options for us to use that. The issue becomes is we need about 2.5 acres for replacement central. That site is 2.1 acres. When you look at the time study that was done extensively in 2017, you put a pin in the center of the intersection of Grand and Thomas, and that is where our fire station belongs for the most centric response in that district. And how I like to describe that is when we look at these districting in our community as far as fire station placement, imagine a spider web, a perfectly formed spider web with the fire station right in the center of it, meaning that everyone's getting an equal distribution of services. The further you move a fire station away from that central origin point for the best timeline, that spider web becomes distorted, meaning other neighborhoods are going to get very quick and timely response, others are going to wait longer. And so we try to have it really balanced. So within that couple blocks radius of the corner of the intersection of Grand and Thomas, there's no sites except the Floral property, unless we're going to buy a neighborhood and raise a neighborhood. We can fit a fire station on that. Likely, we're going to come back and have to buy some adjacent properties to that. But this is sitting on the open market. Just recently, a dollar store or Dollar General is looking at purchasing that property. It's sitting out on the vacant open market. It is the time to pounce on this opportunity to at least have that anchor. Likely, this is going to take years in the making. I think it's my recommendation as I'm departing the city at the end of the year that we enter into a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for the construction of that downtown station. That downtown station is failing this community. It is putting us in a horrible response posture and no longer meets the needs of our department in this community. That flower shop property we would use it facing Floral Avenue with a traffic control light. We're not going to cut medians. We're not going to disturb the current traffic flow. We're going to enter it in a safer manner. All of our fire apparatus, emergency apparatus are equipped with an Opticom system that as an emergency vehicle with emergency lights tripped and running, they are getting green light, green arrow at every intersection that they have. With a single installation of a traffic control light at that intersection, as our units leave, literally by tripping on their emergency lights, we would trip a traffic control that would stop traffic in either direction and allow our emergency vehicles to enter into the lane of traffic. It would actually be much safer than what we're currently doing, where we're basically entering right into the middle of an intersection. So this site's been extensively surveyed, researched. Five Bugles Design, we're inviting them to the meeting next week, Tuesday, to talk in their own words about their site study. He's going to provide us with some of the mapping that was provided at that point that I don't have in Tracy Kajawa's old files. So, it's off topic because it's not what we're going to vote on today, but yet as this comes up, I want to answer these questions clearly.
Well, and it makes some sense, but I think the other thing, and the question I'll probably have in finance, and maybe this is a question that we'll ask our engineers, is we know that Grand Ave Business 51, I believe, is a connecting highway. And so when that happens and you want to cut new or altered access there or add new or different traffic controls, sometimes there's different processes that get triggered. And so when you look at the car stacking that happens in the left turn lane in the northbound Grand Avenue, Floral Ave isn't that far back. I mean, those cars stack right back pretty much to Floral at rush hour. So if we were to install lights that close to the Grand and Thomas intersection, that could have other collateral effects. So, I'll certainly have that question for finance as far as feasibility, if we can even make changes or get access. I think in some of those cases, changes are possible, but you don't proceed without DOT, and that is a slow and long process. So, we found that out with trying to modify signals on Scott Street to close up McIndoe. So I think that, we'll need the input of some of our engineers as far as what our traffic patterns look like. But, if we can get an answer from them that it's possible, I think that will also help us make that decision. But definitely Tuesday night, we'll delve into some of those details too. So,
Madam Chairman,
yes, go ahead.
last year, we suggested as a committee that the fire department take a look at the access issues and work with our city engineering. And it doesn't appear they did that.
When was that meeting? I don't recall
During the
that.
CIP, Chief.
It was this year,
That's not a
though.
formal request. Discussion at CIP is not a request for me to conduct work.
No.
I understand that,
Yeah.
Chief. I understand that. I'm not picking on you.
You're
I'm making a
accusing that I
comment.
didn't do something that you requested me to do.
No, that question started with Jeremy's presentation at the beginning of this process, when we asked about, if it was even possible to set one there based on where we were at for traffic volumes, I think.
Madam Chairman,
Go
I'll
ahead.
continue if I might.
Sure.
There is a issue that I looked at. I talked with DPW Chair, or the Director, and as he pointed out to me, and you've already stated, that intersection is pretty much owned by the state. And the state's going to have a lot to say about any modifications that take place there. Not last but least, when you talk about spending $800,000 for a piece of property, and Chief, I know I've already pissed you off, so I'll make this comment for you. I can't think of a better place to actually have a fire station. I agree with you 100% on that. But when I can't get my truck through the alleys, and I ain't got a Ram truck, I can't get my truck through 40 when there's people parked there, and there are people that park there, it makes a real issue about when you show $800,000 per piece of property, we also need to show anticipated costs to reach over and get to Thomas so he can go out. Now, one of the people last year on this committee suggested that Prospect would be an alternate route to Town Line. And they just simply said that might be a viable point. And I don't recall who the alderman was that was here, said, no, that would disrupt part of my district and it would create some other issues, and Prospect would not necessarily be the best place. So when we make this recommendation for $800,000, it is incumbent on us as taxpayers and as members of the councils that sit here to provide as much information to the public who pays for this. And I'm sure you're very much aware who pays for your equipment, without a question. I'm not suggesting that. So you're going to have to wipe out some more houses. There's no anticipation there. And last but not least, and this is a side comment, Dollar General is filed for Chapter 11 2 months ago. And Dollar General has already closed 5 stores between Marathon County and Portage County. I don't know what they're doing. Now, years ago, when Sears filed for it and they pulled out of here, I thought Sears was gone. When I went out west, there's still shopping centers with Sears and pennies in them. So I'm not quite sure how all of that works. I'm not that type of person. But all that information needs to be weighed as you start through this. And I find it challenging that we have not followed through in looking at things. Now, the deputy chief who's sitting here was kind enough when I asked him for some information to meet with me and show me some different potential ways of setting the building. And I would simply say that I was very pleasantly surprised. You owe me, as you say, you don't answer to me. You don't have to do anything I say. You don't have to talk to me. I'm a private citizen. And I hope that's really not what you think.
Well, this is step one of about 1,000 steps, and the acquisition of this property is one of them. You're exactly right, Mr. Gale, that we are likely to have a lot of impacts that need to be studied and looked at yet. But this was extensively looked at 2017. I believe that the conversations occurred with the DOT at that time, but I can follow up on those. And I don't mean to get defensive, but whether you're a citizen or anything, anybody comes to me with a request, I see it through. And if there was a request to me to do some work last year on this and it wasn't done, then I take it personally. And so, because I like to answer questions to this community, because I answer to the community, including you.
Sure.
And so, so that's where we sit with that. I look forward to, I won't be here Tuesday night. I'm going to be out up north camping. Jeremy Koppel will be representing the department.
Okay.
I'll be filing this report later today with the, to get it agendized for Tuesday night. Thank
That'll
you.
work. And so I think for now, because the Finance Committee, obviously, in their budget process, can actually take our list and move up anything they want. For our initial recommendation, since we're having the ARPA discussion again, I feel like it makes sense to leave that land acquisition where it's at on the list, leave it sit for now in a holding pattern until we know what happens with Tuesday night. And then Finance can take the things below the line if they find some, alternative fund sources or new funding and they can certainly move those things up. So where we landed was our core list ended with the 400 block site upgrades, and then we've added, pending funding, the Myron Street roof, council video and technology in this chamber, the River Edge Trail extension, and the asset management software. Is that, do we have, is that?
Madam Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Okay, so we have a motion from Mr. Gale to forward this list as developed today. Is there a second for that? Second from Mr. Gisselman. Further comment? If not, then, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. So then the Finance Committee will get this list. They'll see our total list of what we've scored, and then depending on, as they delve into their budget process, which begins in, late September, October, and, really grind out the nuts and bolts of what we have for funding and borrowing, that's when they can, take a second look at this list if the opportunity presents itself. So with that, I'll thank everybody for their work on this project this summer. It's easier some years than others. Sometimes it's more difficult than it's been this year, but there's a couple times that it's been much easier, and we had one year that we were almost able to fund the whole list, so that we would love to have all the time, but we never really come out there. So with that, I'll take a motion. Oh, we have a second item, sorry. Discussion and possible action regarding proposed schedule and process for 2025 to 2029 CIP review. And you'll see in your packets, there's a memo from Emily talking about maybe a modification to our timeline when we begin this process in terms of the planning and the kickoff. She's proposing that we do at least some planning and strategic plan review and things before we get underway mid-March. And then the rest of the timeline kind of looks like it's been. 3, 4 sessions in the summer to get us through the presentations and then our choices. How do you guys feel about that? Michael, go
I
ahead.
guess I'll start. I'm in favor of a planning meeting because I think that would give the departments a little bit of direction where the CIP committee would like to see things go, and maybe that, well, I know it's always a little bit of a surprise when you get the big packet in June on what everybody's looking for. So maybe if we look at the strategic plan ahead of time and aid in a little bit of direction, we'll have a little bit more cohesive list and requests when that time comes in June. My only concern is that, and I know this would happen every other year, but having the planning meeting, in the middle of election season, would we run the risk of having outgoing council members, incoming council members into the CIP committee, or do you think that really wouldn't matter at that early of a point in the game?
That is true. I mean, we could have, because all those committees and subcommittees are up for reappointment by the mayor in April of 2024. Would we be ahead or put ourselves behind if we waited and did this planning process? I mean, the departments are doing their project requests in April and May, right, normally?
Yeah, we usually kick off the end of March.
Okay.
So, my other, I guess, comment is, we are implementing new budget software right now it's called Adaptive Planning, which now is owned by Workday, but was, an independent company at the time. And when we looked at the workload, we made a decision to do the CIP as phase 2. So we'll be starting that budget implementation next year. So it's supposed to start in February. I'm a little, we're still working a lot of overtime. And I'm just worried whether we're going to be ready in February. So I think that was the other concern I had when I looked at this was, oh my God, if we're not dead by that time, maybe
Right.
we can do it. So that would be another item that would hold up the process, would be if we got a little delayed in the software, because we're not going to want to put it off a second year.
So in that, would it be helpful then if we began in parallel in April? like,
We
the
could.
departments will be starting to do some of their requests. Obviously, they know what the needs are. And I think in terms of our planning, I think there's, we had talked about maybe some educational planning to look at the strategic plan, which has been adopted. That's a static document. I mean, it's, that's something that we could present to this committee anytime. And then we had even talked about, in our request form, adding a little line about which strategic plan initiative each project furthers. So that it helps tie these asks and our decision-making back to that plan.
Sure.
So, and even if we would begin with, this iteration of the CIP committee and then assume that we even have membership change, I think through the minutes, it will be possible for any new members to catch up on where we've left off. Michael?
Yeah, and absolutely, and kind of thinking through my conversation, I think too, it shouldn't make much of a difference with, old people going off, new members coming onto the committee in that, because this is just kind of aligning our, we're not, the purpose of the initial planning meeting wouldn't be to change focus, change strategy, but would to align what is our department requests with what is already published within our strategic plan. So
Right, and it's clear through these processes and the budget that it's not difficult to see the direction we've been trying to go. So I think that, they'd be able to catch up even if we have new members, even if they're new alders. I think it would be easy to, get people up to speed with the direction, with what we've been trying to do as far as staying ahead of certain things and catching up on others. So, go ahead, Mr. Gale.
The reality is that you're stuck with two questions here. One, you have the folks who've been working on this council and through these processes for a couple of years and understands the focus of where the city is trying to go and what the staff's trying to do. The second side of that is you have new people coming on who have new ideas but don't understand how you got to the position you're in. So what I would say is that if you do it in March, the advantage you have is you have the people who have sat through and worked through at least a couple of years of the process and understand the process. As you start through after that in April, there's nothing that's going to be a major change that wouldn't be reflected in the normal CIP process, that any new member of council would have a chance to review, look at, and then influence in the direction they would like to go. So I think that by using the process of the folks who've been here, we actually do better because there's no major change to what we're trying to do. We have a thought process that says, this is how we got here, this is where we think we're going to go, and then they still have, the new members of the council still have time, if they ran on an issue or if they've been hearing things in their district, to adjust and try to influence the changes, and then the following year, you're in a different situation.
That's
So-
true. I think there's value in that experience, like you said, because we all have been around the process and we know the rationale for our decision-making. I think that, this committee being an advisory one to the finance committee, that's also helpful because we have some dual membership. So that helps us communicate the thought pattern of this body to the finance committee when the recommendations come forward as far as, what were you thinking with this or that? We can recount that experience. So I think you're right. I think we should maybe try this timeline and see. We can always make adjustments if it's not working. We're pretty nimble with scheduling, so if we find that come March, we're not ready, we can always put it off a few weeks and then, work with the staff team as they're able. So, okay, then do you need us to vote to adopt this plan, or would we just accept this by consensus as a trial? Okay, I think if we're all in agreement, we'll just accept it by consensus. It won't need voting action. And that's kind of where we'll begin then for the early part of next year. So it's always good to be ahead of it a little bit. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Martins, is there a second? Second by Gisselman. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one's ever opposed to
Thanks,
leaving.
everybody.
All right, thanks, everyone.